Welcome to the Cincy Postcast. I'm your host, Kevin Wallace, and we have an awesome episode lined up for you. For one, it's match week. Finally, we've made it to this point. The Philadelphia match looms at the end of this week. So in this one, we've got a two-parter for you. In part one, it is FC Cincinnati news. What is the latest on Aaron Boupendza, the other injuries around the club? A certain someone got a nice contract extension and more. And then in part two, well, the other two bozos joining me in this podcast, so they've got a punishment to serve, and that punishment is served this episode. You put those two together, and that'll be your postcast. And joining me to talk about all of that and more, I'm joined by two gentlemen ready and excited, finally, for match week. We've made it through the wilderness that was the MLS postseason schedule. Chief, how we feeling now that we're in the week?
I'm just ready for some soccer, man. I'm just ready for this postseason to get going. I mean, you've got the Twitter admin for FC Cincinnati outright stating the obvious. It's, how have you guys been dealing with no soccer? It's like, I don't know, man. Ask your bosses why this was the case. This is garbage. Feeling good.
Right.
I'll be very eager to get through this week. I am a noted hater of Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving is the most overrated of all the holidays. I find Thanksgiving food to be mostly bland mush that's overly carby, not my cup of tea. So I just look to survive Thanksgiving. And this year it is kind of nice. The one benefit of this playoff format is that while I am forced to eat, turkey, which is the objectively the worst type of poultry, or bird product, and stuffing and gelatinous cranberry and all this crap that nobody eats outside of Thanksgiving. There is no other time of the year that anyone eats this because no one really likes this food. While I am forced to do this twice at two different households because wife's family, my family, I will at least have the prospect of a Saturday FC Cincinnati game to get me through this. So I'm happy we're here, and I'm happy at the very least that if we had to suffer through this, there is that light at the end of this horrid family shitty food hell that is Thanksgiving.
So I like Thanksgiving food, but we're not going to have that conversation. Because
you would just be wrong.
No,
it would just be easily proven.
We're not going to have that conversation. But I had a funny exchange today. So we were talking to my mother-in-law, who's my in-laws are immigrants who did not grow up with Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving, food, or just that holiday in general. And they're hosting a bunch of, they're empty nesters. They're hosting a bunch of their neighbors or going to a neighbor's. I wasn't quite clear for Thanksgiving. So they have to figure out they had to figure out how to make a traditional Thanksgiving dish. Yeah. And my mother-in-law has found out about casserole now.
Yeah.
And the way she described it was so funny. She was like, do you know those cans that Andy Warhol used to draw? you open them up and you pour them into a pan and you just cook it together.
Yeah. Nailed it.
I just love that the frame of reference is I've seen these at an art museum.
Yeah. There's little cans they used to draw. It turns out there's something to them. There's something in them. It's very
something
funny.
Inside them. There's a reason that he drew them other than just the cans themselves. They actually mean something. These images have meaning.
I do love that description specifically. I think it'd be interesting to see what would be the best combination of strictly opening can and dump. What is the best dish you can make only using canned products?
This is also furthering my point that at no point during the year do you ever look across the table, like when you have the inevitable conversation where your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your whatever it is, says, "What do you want to do for dinner tonight?" No one looks in that conversation and says, "I don't know. What about if we go out somewhere and get a casserole tonight?" Nobody wants that.
The Eagle serves like nothing but Thanksgiving food.
I would even suggest, what is a 3-way if not a sloppy casserole?
Like the Eagle has been pretty strong running for a while.
Especially if you go 4-way, 5-way, dangerously casserole.
Well, then serve that for Thanksgiving. That would make Thanksgiving exponentially better.
Cincinnati chili over the turkey. I mean, it can't be that bad, right?
You know what? That sounds like an instant improvement to this holiday. A Thanksgiving 3-way: turkey, chili, cheese.
A Thanksgiving 3-way. I think that's the title of an episode of Dr. Cop, Attorney at Law.
See where she gets one of her doctor friends and one of her cop friends, and
see, she's got 3 professions. She, in and of itself, is a 3-way. So this is perfect.
The menage a trois of CBS television.
They love getting scandalous on CBS, let me tell you. So we are here. It is match week. It is Thanksgiving week. And we've got, I guess, a little bit of FC Cincinnati news to talk about. Somehow, some way, we will discuss this team. I think the biggest news here is, of course, Aaron Boupendza. We upgraded the Boupendza watch to a Boupendza warning as he was in training this week. Very exciting moment for anybody, including ourselves, who may have been concerned that he would not make it back or make it back in time or even on time. But coming from Pat Brennan earlier this week, Aaron Boupendza expected to return tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. But this is my favorite part. Chris Albright said FC Cincy is supporting Boupendza after his dismissal from the Gabon national team during the ongoing FIFA window. More coming. Grayson, this confirms a lot of our priors. The Gabonese national team's a weird place to be, and things might not always be what they seem on the surface here, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. So Noonan was on Eric Winalda's Sirius XM show on, I want to say Friday, and actually addressed this briefly, a little cryptically, but he said, Aaron, may have been a little hard done by there. There's 2 sides to every story. And he said, it was an issue that happened that wasn't their issue. It was a national team issue. And, he was expected back Friday night. He got back Friday night. He practiced on Saturday. Man, this is like another thing that it's almost like it never happened.
Yeah.
It's like you would not believe how much this never happened if he shows up on Saturday and plays well. And I got to say, there was some distasteful, I don't want to say, maybe, I don't know if dunking is the right word, but I'll say there was some distasteful dunking, I thought, from some of the fans on various social media channels, seemingly ready to just, write him off.
Yeah.
Buy out 4 years of his contract and lose the $7 million transfer fee. There's just a lot of insane talk.
Right.
And it's like we had no idea what happened with the national team.
Right.
But it is a national team that has not been without drama, in the past.
Right.
So we don't know what happened with the national team. We may never know. But I think people need to chill out on him a little bit, because most of what people think he did is stuff people imagined he did.
Right.
And really the only issue that they've really had with him was the one time he went to national team duty and stuck around a few extra days. And if I'm not mistaken, no. Yeah. That was October, right? And they sat him.
Yeah, October. He came back. I think it was a day late. He was with the team and had a training session, I believe, before that next match. Is it a Philly match as well?
No, that wasn't the one he was.
Okay, no,
that wasn't
no.
the one he was sat for.
Okay,
but there was some delay in September getting him back before the Philly game.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That seems to have not been a disciplinary issue because they played him.
And they said there was like a flight issue, like his flight was delayed and there was only one out of, he was like flying via Europe, right? So it was like the flight was delayed out of France or Portugal or something like that.
And then there was the time, I forget which game it was that they like sat him. Was it the Red Bull game at home?
It was.
After winning the Shield. So there seems to have been between Toronto and that game there was some disciplinary issue. I don't remember what it was, but like the point is that while there's been international travel delays, he's not the only player who's had international travel delays. Right. It seems like he got back on time after this one.
Yeah.
And he was back in training on Saturday, and Albright and Noonan have both publicly backed him.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just stress, I guess, like if you want to criticize the player, I think you need to sit down and like make a list of like, what are his actual things that are documented incidents?
Right.
And what are things that I've extrapolated in my head?
Right.
And right now, like it just is wild how quickly it seems some people are like ready to like move him on, at a massive loss to ownership. And again, I'll say it because I've seen multiple people say this on social media. The idea that they were going to buy out a guy who's making 7 figures a year and has 4 years left on his deal after just paying a $7 million transfer fee for him that's wild. There was no way that was ever on the table, no matter how bad his behavior has been.
Right.
And, based on actual publicly reported facts, there's been limited discrete behavioral issues, which could easily be chalked up to just, growing pains getting into a new team.
Buying his contract out was always just an absurd take. I mean, now you could have convinced me. So like there's the important distinction here is that I don't blame anyone for their instant reaction to this story when the news dropped that he had been suspended from the Gabon national team for failing to show up to training on time. If your instant reaction to that was, something akin to, just a Jesus Christ, what? Especially on the heels of failing to report back to FC Cincinnati on time, where we were told, and the story was that he gave a mea culpa to the coaching staff and to the technical staff, and everybody said it's okay, it's behind him, he understands what he did wrong. To have this story drop again, I don't fault anyone for the thought being like, what the hell is this guy's problem? Now, with the information that has come out since, if you still have a problem with Aaron Boupendza, the problem is on your end, not on Aaron's end, because the team has been pretty clear at this point that they're not holding this against Boupendza. And the way that the statement was worded from Albright was interesting. And the statement from Albright was something close to, we're still learning how the Gabon national team works. we have a better idea of how Argentina and Colombia work. We're not quite as up on how Gabon works. And reading between the lines on that a little bit, you get the sense that the statement that they're making without making is that we know how to deal with federations that are professionally run. We're not quite as used to dealing with federations that maybe take a few more liberties or maybe leave a few more things unsaid or you handle things a little differently than the top flight professional organizations. They're not going to come out and criticize Gabon because, number one, that would be a bad look for the club. And number two, they wouldn't want to do anything that would ever be perceived as hurting a player from playing or hurting a future player from playing. But that's as close as you're going to get, I think, to an admission from Albright that the fault, if there is one, lies with the national team and how the national team handled this and not with their player. So if you're still on it with Aaron, get off. It's not worth it. He's a striker. Strikers are weird. Strikers that are good strikers are usually you need a little bit of head case to be a great striker.
Yes.
He's a little bit of head case. And as long as he keeps scoring goals like he has been, this isn't even a thing of as long as he scores goals in the future. If he just keeps doing what he has already been doing,
right,
you're going to see this every so often, and you've just got to get over it. This is the price of dealing with world-class players and world-class strikers.
Yeah, and just to be clear, and I kind of butchered the facts a bit myself a moment ago, so I just want to correct that. So it was the October international window where Boupendza didn't return to FC Cincinnati on time, so they sat him for decision day.
Okay.
And that was when they made the statement right around the time of the lineup drop.
That's right.
But, as Chief said, the latest statement out from the team is that they're good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, hand up, we were doing some friendly, fun speculation here on the podcast last episode about him partying or something like that. Like we said then, too, there was a coup that went on in Gabon. I don't know what his family situation is or what could be happening there. Obviously, the weird politics of the team is its own thing. There's so many other things that it could have been as well. And yeah, obviously, if the team is behind him, who are we to not be behind him? And I will also take a moment to differentiate this from, say, what we saw with some of Brenner, which is Brenner showed was behaving in such a way that demonstrated he did not want to be in Cincinnati or playing for FC Cincinnati. Now, sure, some of that was like career aspirations, wanting to move on, but also like didn't seem that thrilled to be here, period. And say what you will about Boupendza, when he's on the field, he is trying his ass off and the effort is generally rewarded with output. I mean, not the highest bar to clear, but Pat Brennan again over the weekend put up on Twitter, Boupendza's first 12 games compared to the other attacking DPs in this club's MLS history. Boupendza's 6 goals stands pretty far and wide above everyone else. Lucho had 4 goals and 3 assists. And then you get to Brenner with 3 goals, Kubo and Locadia with 2 goals, Audi with a goal, Alan Cruz with 2 goals in his first 12 games. But I mean, in terms of a goal every other game for your DP striker, you can't tell me his effort isn't there, that he's not trying to win for this team. So if this team is behind him, I'm behind him.
Was Pat including Audi's games in USL when he also wasn't scoring?
I bet you could give Audi 24 games and you still end up with maybe 2 goals. So
the thing about the Pat's tweet is the other thing to keep in perspective is, Boupendza joined mid-season and he's probably had a lot fewer minutes over those 12 games than the other DPs did.
Man, yeah, it took every single one of those listed joined at the start of a season and had at the very least, everybody else on that, sort of early season front foot as well. I know Locadia was kind of a late signing there, but
now it stands out that Lucha was good, right away, even in 2021. I think that's worth pointing out after that stat. But the last thing I guess I'll say about Boupendza is, and you brought up Brenner. I mean, I don't think the situations are necessarily comparable.
Right.
If you're one of the, let's see, we have 12 listeners now, so let's say 6. If you're one of the 6 listeners who has been listening to us since the very beginning, you'll know that I was a pretty staunch defender of Brenner.
That is true.
Through his entire tenure here.
I'll say Chief and I were not.
To put it mildly.
And, we're talking about somebody who demanded to be let go essentially on close to a free before Noonan's first season, held himself out, essentially gave up half the season of 22 and gave up nearly the entire time he was here in 23 due to, essentially a refusal to play. And he was really good when he was in the team regularly and focused. Yeah. But he would have been better if he had made himself available the entire time he was under contract.
Would have been nice.
And like Boupendza has been sat, the Atlanta game due to disciplinary reasons. But we don't have examples of Boupendza just choosing not to make himself available for selection. You could say that he's constructively...
No, if anything,
you could say that the Atlanta game, I guess, you could say he constructively made himself not chosen for selection. But like we saw in Philly, he's totally willing to show up at 1:30 p.m. off of an international flight and play.
And let's talk about this situation here. Like, he willingly came back to Cincinnati early by doing something that screwed up his chances to play for Gabon. That's a commitment that he came back here early to be ready for this playoff game with FC Cincinnati.
And, if he wasn't committed, he could have said, look, it was Gabon's choice to release me from the roster, but you wouldn't have me here, for a few days anyway.
Right.
So, if I just chill for a bit, no harm done, right?
Right.
But he came back for
peace out. I'm going to Ibiza.
But he came back for a 1-day training session that came immediately after a break and came right before a 2-day break.
Yeah.
Right. So getting here. So, he could have taken, I guess, a couple more days to get here and just missed one training session. But yet he was still, able and willing to get here for that Saturday training session. And now he's going to be here for the whole week leading up to the game against Philly. I think there's value in that. And we should recognize the value in that.
Absolutely. And I'm perfectly honest. I really thought he would take advantage of that. I didn't expect him back as quickly as he was back. So that was great to see that tweet, Carter's tweet. Yeah.
The real problem here is, there's a lot of real problems here, but the real problem here is that because this league doesn't get the amount of press coverage and the amount of media access that other leagues get, it really does limit the opportunities for players like Boupendza to tell their side of the story to a large extent. Like in most other sports, the NBA or the NFL, if there was some issue with the player would find the reporter, would talk to the reporter, and they would get their narrative out there. We would have an open locker room after practice, and the reporter would be able to say to Aaron, hey, tell us what went on at Gabon. Is everything all right? Are you good? And then Boupendza would give an interview and say, yeah, no, it was really stupid. The coach really has an issue with how I was doing something, and they got mad that I was late for jogging on the field or whatever it is, and the story gets out there. But because this league just doesn't operate that way with the level of openness that other American sports do, which is, cultural to soccer, and also because a lot of these players have a language barrier where they don't feel as comfortable communicating in English, and Boupendza speaks English by all accounts, but we don't know what his preference is in terms of how much he likes to do English language interviews. Mm-hmm. It just makes it tough for the stories to get out there that I think would be helpful to some of these players trying to combat narratives like this. And it's a unique MLS problem that the league would be wise to solve at some point, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, to put it in perspective, Aaron Boupendza transfer fee, $7 million, is making a hair over $1 million. Actually, we got that partway through the season, so he might actually be closer to $2 million a season for his base salary.
I think what they reported is probably the full year number.
Okay.
Based on how other players that joined part of the way through the season were reported, but again, it's hard.
So in that case, he's around 1.25 million, right? Give or take.
Yep.
So to put that in perspective, the last NWSL franchise fee was $50 million. The one before that was $5 million. Salary cap this year for the NWSL was $1.3 million. For the cost of Aaron Boupendza, to buy him out and to eat that transfer fee for what would have been nothing and very little production over that, you could have had an NWSL franchise and paid all of the players' salaries for 5 years. Just in case people were wondering, just buy him out. That's nothing. It's okay. Or you could have ran a women's franchise for half a decade. That is the amount of money we are talking about here.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that Albright would not have survived.
No.
Well, I mean, he'd have survived, but I'm saying there would have been strike one on Albright if they went to Linder and asked him to eat that kind of money.
His next EP is much smaller.
Don't forget that they took a loss on Brenner.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get hardly any of the, I think, $4 million in change that they spent for Atonga.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I
always forget.
There's a number of other players on the roster that represent fairly hefty transfer fee and salary numbers. They're not going to get any transfer fee back for Acosta, right?
Right.
They're not going to get any transfer fee back, or they're unlikely to get a significant transfer fee back for Obi, right? Because they signed these guys for long-term deals, and they're paying them, and the team has certainly shown willingness to spend. But there's a difference between a willingness to spend and a willingness to, just flush nearly $10 million a year down the drain on transfer fees with no return.
Yeah,
and they start to see some return. And you can get into the good kind of cycle where you're spending money in some places, but the money's coming back in other places. Mm-hmm. But they just haven't done that yet.
Not for nothing. They also spent close to $400,000 this year buying out Kenneth Vermeer, which just cracks me up that happened. So there you go. So that's the Aaron Boupendza.
They also got to save money to eventually buy out Yuya Kubo's lifetime contract. So that's going to be a hefty penny when you look at what he's making and project that out over the course of the remaining 50 to 60 years of his life.
What's the expected life expectancy of a professional athlete from Japan? It has to be 102, right? That is
it's not going to be good for the actuarial tables there.
He's in good health by all means. He's really hurt. Did they buy out Adi? I think technically, but they waived him, so it's just
waivers, but they still,
They paid his salary. They just split it with Columbus. Yeah.
Well, I think Columbus paid like $80,000 of it. So they paid like $1.6 million
right.
of his salary for a player that did not play for us that year.
It would be really fun to look at like the dead money under Nijkamp and the corresponding players that could have been spent on. And you could build like an all-star team of $6 million in dead cap money the last couple of years. Good stuff. So that is the latest we have on the Boupendza news. So he is fine and settled in, which is all good. Other notes here from training that I want to quickly capture here. We're keeping an eye on a couple of other players as well. Working inside was Santiago Arias and Obina Nwobodo. Brandon Vasquez and Dom Bocci were doing individual work, which is, I hope, code for they're working one-on-one with Dom Kinnear, the striker whisperer, get them in shape. But whenever I see players working individually, get a little uneasy. There was also Alvis Powell had popped up on one of these reports. I can't find at the moment.
He's back at full training, I believe.
Okay, great.
But he had been out. I think, didn't he miss the second game?
He did.
Second
he was
Red Bull
hurt,
game.
yeah.
And another tidbit from the Noonan interview with Eric Winalda was Noonan said that if they had played a third game, he did not specify who, but we can guess who based on who hasn't trained. He said if we'd played a third game against Red Bulls, we would have been missing several players. But his hope was that with the extended layoff, that they could work these guys back in.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with, in particular, OB and Arias.
Yeah.
Those are what they really need to do is they need to get Nick Hagland to go see Aaron Rodgers' doctor and inject him with whatever the hell Aaron Rodgers is being treated with, where they're saying he's going to be back from his torn Achilles before the end of this football season.
That just feels so irresponsible, but hey, I don't know. I don't know nothing about nothing.
I'm staying woke, though. I don't think he really tore his Achilles. I think that he's conspiring with everyone to make his pseudoscience medicine work, and that it was just a really bad sprain or something like that. And he is doing this just so that he can get the pop for, see, I didn't follow your traditional medicine, and look what I did.
Wow, that's good. Especially if he does well for the last handful of weeks. Maybe the Jets sneak a playoff spot. I don't know. I think they're probably out of it at this point. But comeback player of the year,
they're cooked.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement though that Obi, that has to be the one that comes back, right? If they don't have Obi and Miazga, this is going to be a very, very difficult game to win.
Yeah. Obi's the one to keep an eye on. And then obviously Arias is sort of the cherry on top of this team. He certainly makes a lot of things go easier. Certainly frees up Barreal on the left side, as teams kind of have to respect both sides of the defense, both sides of the field there. But yeah, this team, and honestly the result against Philadelphia may come down to Obi's health, and that seems scary. But if he's ready to go, if we've got a 90% Obi and he is healthy and able to play 85 minutes, then I think we win it. And if he is unable to suit up, coin flip at best. I really think that's where this comes down to. So yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I don't want to jump on the next episode and start previewing Philly, but but heading into the week,
right?
Nothing we can do about it. But the news to follow is, where is Obi during training?
Yeah, and that's basically what we've got to be keeping an eye on here. Other than that, I mean, let's hope we don't have another Nick Hagland situation, who got hurt in training before the playoffs. So We just basically need everybody to stay healthy, stay alive, and just survive the last little bit of this international break and get these guys back into training camp later on this week. Right now, vibes check Sunday night. How are we feeling? We'll definitely do a full preview later on, but how do we feel right now, Chief?
I mean, if you're going to say vibes check, we got to mention, too, the other bit of news that broke
yes, we
while we were on hiatus. Great friend of the postcast, Evan Loro, not one, but 2 years of an extension, going to be with the Orange and Blue through 2025. You love to see it. You just absolutely love to see it. The vibes guy of FC Cincinnati being honored and being recognized for the incredible vibes that he brings to the team. I don't think it's a coincidence that this extension comes on the heels of a penalty shootout win for the FC, when we know that he's the guy that is out there taking extra PK work to try and get these guys in shape to take penalties. I had the biggest grin on my face when that news came across my timeline. Evan seems like just a dude, just a dude's dude, good soccer bro, and love to see it, especially in light of the fact that there were, to go inside the bit a little bit, rumors swirling around in the postcast Discord that Evan's house was for sale. We all thought this was foreshadowing that he might be on the move away from Cincinnati. We were very sad about that. Turns out, in the article that Carter wrote, that was an absolute must read, he was going to flex his newfound financial freedom to buy a larger house for his growing family. So it wasn't a sign of him leaving. It was a sign of him putting down even deeper roots, and that just warms my heart.
It was a sign of him committing to Cincinnati, right? For the next few years. So I would encourage everybody to read Carter's article.
Yes.
Carter's been really doing great work with the various player profiles and things he's been putting up on the website. But I want to mention one thing without going over the entire article. But Evan does kind of shrink from the vibes guy label in the article. He balks at it a little bit. And, he just says, I don't show up thinking like I have to rally everybody. I just try to have a good time. And, all due respect to Evan, that's how a real vibes guy operates.
Yes.
A real vibes guy is somebody who is just
yes.
naturally, good to be around and a good presence in the locker room. It's not somebody who feels like it's their responsibility to keep everybody in good spirits. I mean, think about like your office. Who do you like being around, right? The people that are just good people to be around, or like the supervisor or manager who's constantly just trying to pump everybody up,
right?
And is putting, crap on LinkedIn that's, all chipper and
hustle culture.
Sending office, full office emails with a bunch of exclamation points and emojis,
the ultimate fake vibes guy was? The ultimate fake vibes guy was Jameis Winston, quarterback, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now with the New Orleans Saints. And a fake vibes guy is a guy who, he gives one speech to the locker room where everyone is like, oh man, that was really, really good. And then feels the need constantly. Oh, that's my personality now. I've got to be the hype guy. And then before you know it, you're on the field in New Orleans, stuffing a W into your mouth while Deshaun Jackson looks on from the background like, the fuck is this guy? And that's a fake vibes guy. You're trying way too hard to fire everyone up. You're trying way too hard to be the guy. The real vibes guy, the one who's just like, I'm me. I don't go to put on a show. I don't go to hype up the boys. I go to hang with the boys, and the boys seem to want to hang with me. And that's cool. And the other thing too is that with Evan, I understand why he bristles at the idea that he's a vibes guy, because he's also objectively really good
right.
as a player. And when you label someone as a vibes guy, there's sort of an unsaid bit that, well, you know, he might not have the skills to play, but he really is good and he's a good person for the culture. And it's kind of a damning with faint praise kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the way his contract is set up is that he's going to be here for 2 years. I think there's a non-insubstantial chance that he goes into 2024, that we go into 2024 with Evan as the number one backup to Roman, and Evan will be the guy that plays the cups. And then they either go and get a younger player to be the third keeper that is the shuttle and the transfer between FCC2 and the main roster as needed. But I think Evan may be the cup keeper next year.
Yeah. And, you know, I know we have not seen Evan play with the first team, but we do know unequivocally that Evan was better in USL than a number of keepers, I'm not going to name them, who were starting games in MLS this year.
Yeah.
So that should not go. That fact should not be missed.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Lunt got 3 starts in MLS for St. Louis, and he was the guy I felt like was absolutely slighted for FCC. Grayson won't name names, I will. No, I think this also sets up nicely for, we'll talk more about this when we get to this point, but I think this paves the way for a future without Alec Can. It seems likely he will be given the opportunity to compete for a starting job elsewhere in the league. Looking around the league, looking at people who might need a goalkeeper next year.
Atlanta United.
Atlanta United makes so much sense to just bring him right back. They're probably kicking themselves they didn't have him this year or last year. So that feels like a real natural fit to send him back to Atlanta. Chief, it looked like you were going to say something. Yeah, sorry.
No, just it's good. Like he's deserved a little better than what he's had here. It's through no fault of his own. Right. I don't think when he signed here, they expected that a generation Adidas keeper would fall to them, and that this player would be absolutely game ready on week 1. So hard done, but I think that he'll find work easily in MLS elsewhere. Yeah. You asked originally, Kevin, about the vibes, and we got off track on Evan as the vibes guy.
We did. That's fine.
The vibes are nervous.
Yeah.
I'll see how I feel when we preview Philly, but this is where it's real. This is one and done. This is single elimination soccer, and I don't know. I'd feel a lot better if the team was fully healthy and we were going to have our full complement of regulars available to play this game, and we don't. So yeah.
Is it Paul Walters? Is that the young keeper that's over with Hoffenheim right now? He feels like your number 3 for next year, just to round it all out. So there we go. Is there anything else for FCC that we might have missed or? Oh, not FCC, but needs to be said on this podcast, because I don't know where else we will mention it. So I will mention it now, and this will include an open invitation. Valhalla FC, a Ohio Valley Premier League team, played Chicago House, formerly a NISA team. I think they are also in the Ohio Valley Premier League, maybe not. For the 2024 Open Cup qualifications, they lost that match. Had they won, they would have punched their ticket to the 2024 Open Cup. However, great to see a local team getting close to the Open Cup. Love the amateur sides that do get a chance to do that. However, it needs to be said that Valhalla FC plays the Lights of Cincinnati after their matches over the speakers. This was the suggested song by Pat Brennan on this podcast. There is a fringe movement to make it still the celebratory song after wins for FC Cincinnati, saying goodbye to Mr. Brightside. A local team did it. One, how have we not heard of these guys before? And two, how do we get them on the podcast?
I just want to know, are they fans of the podcast? And is this where they got the idea for the Lights of Cincinnati? I want to know if they're listeners.
Be a hell of
a coincidence. Are they one of the dozen?
Be a hell of a coincidence.
I want to know the story behind the song. But, I don't know. I tried to find like the names of like anybody associated with this team, but like there's none on the website. I didn't try very hard. I probably could have done something. But if somebody has a link to them, we would love to have, one or more of them on the show to talk about the team and what they're doing over in the Ohio Valley Premier League.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that was great when that popped up, came across my timeline. I was like, well, this feels like...
Does the Ohio Valley Premier League have pro rel, though? That's the real question. Are they like the real Premier League?
Pet peeve, and nothing against Valhalla FC. Leagues calling themselves Premier when they are objectively anything but drives me insane. I'm not asking for you to call yourself the crappy league or anything like that, but like Ohio Valley Soccer League feels fine. Ohio Valley Regional League seems fine. Premier League? Really? Every youth team is the Premier this, Premier that. They all can't be.
How can that be a pet peeve, though, when over in England you have the Premier League, but then below that you have the Championship, which is decidedly not played for the Championship of England. Below that, League One, which is objectively not the first league. And then below that, League Two, which is not the second league.
So there, it's
soccer
tradition.
Names are dumb. Soccer names are dumb.
It is dumb. It is all dumb.
You're also talking about a country where the website for the league is MLSsoccer.com. The S in MLS standing for soccer. The website is Major League Soccer.com.
And you can pay for it at an ATM machine. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, if I were in charge of English soccer, I think I'd do a rebrand of some sorts. But no, always remember the Premier League was the first breakaway Super League. And if you're a fan of a Premier League team and you hate the Super League, you're the problem. So there you go. That'll do it for part one. Part two. I mean, if you come to the postcast for FC Cincinnati news, I'll sign your permission slip to stop listening now because it becomes very much not FC Cincinnati after this. We've got two gentlemen here that owe the listeners, all 12 of them, a punishment. They both committed high crimes and misdemeanors, and they need to atone for their sins. And so we will be doing that in part two. This episode is also brought to you by Cincy Shirts. Look, you know Cincy Shirts. You love Cincy Shirts. They've been with FCC from the beginning, and we here at the Postcast, we're just huge fans of their work. They were very early sponsors of the Postcast here, and we have always enjoyed their work. If you head on over to CincyShirts.com, that's Cincy with a Y, shirts.com, and check out using the promo code ThePostCincy, all one word, all caps, you will get 10% off your order, and you let them know that we sent you. Like, they have MLS and MLSPA licensed FCC gear available online and at their 2 retail locations in Hyde Park and Fort Mitchell. If they don't have your size on the shelf, they can print you one on the spot. That is a fantastic feature and something that I have used as well. So again, special thank you to Cincy Shirts. Head on over to their website or check the link down below in the description for the promo code ThePostCincy for 10% off your next order. And a huge thank you to Cincy Shirts. All right, we are back in part two. And if you're sticking around, this is on you. Okay. We have here two of my co-hosts have, I'll say, let slip a word that we do not say on this podcast. That word being a name, that name being censored. So to pay the swear jar, both Grayson and Chief watched a little film over the weekend and are here to provide us their book report. Chief, you were the first offender, so I'll let you intro this. What did you watch?
So, as penance, Grayson and I were directed by ourselves, because this is entirely a prison of our own making as a show, to watch a little film, a right-wing propaganda film done by director Dinesh D'Souza, a former, I believe he worked in the Reagan administration before his mind turned to total mush.
Yeah.
And the movie is called Police State. We'll put the documentary in quotes. It's a documentary about America's fall into a pseudo-fascist police state that uses police powers, federal powers, and the, I guess, deep state powers to spy on American citizens and persecute American citizens for their political beliefs and their political agendas. And, I watched this movie. I went into this movie with an open mind. And my top line review of this movie is that, Grayson, we've got some real problems in this country, and we have some real patriots that are behind bars right now that we need to talk more about.
Yeah, so the movie is ostensibly about, it's ostensibly about how the people involved with January 6th have been unfairly persecuted.
What a take.
What it's really about is Dinesh D'Souza committed campaign finance fraud.
That's right.
And had to report to a halfway house a couple times a week for a couple years as his sentence for fairly blatant campaign finance fraud. And he actually admits, or he doesn't really deny in the movie, that he did it. So
no, they gloss right over that.
So a lot of the movie is about the FBI entrapping people or prosecuting people for political things, and there's a ton of stuff glossed over, but if you watch it closely, he just kind of slips in they caught me and I'm mad that I was convicted and had to do anything for this. And what it reminded me of is when I was in high school, I got detention once for skipping the lunch line when it was really long. And in the time in my detention, I was so mad about it that I wrote an essay about how we were under the thumb of these automaton functionaries who were just obsessed with enforcing their little arbitrary rules so that they can feel powerful. And this was basically that, but by a 50-something-year-old man. And it was 2 hours long. So yeah, that's my
the title of Grayson's essay.
summary.
Incidentally, was The Catcher in My Rye.
And then I guess one other overarching thing I want to say is so a lot of the movies about how the FBI is bad and how the FBI is mistreating citizens.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there is no mention of COINTELPRO, Martin Luther King,
right.
Malcolm X,
the actual crimes,
the Chicago 7, or anything. Because the movie, so according to the movie, the first bad thing the FBI ever did was Waco, which was the ATF.
I was going to say that was the ATF, right?
So I guess Ruby Ridge. He does say that he does admit.
Well, no, what he says is that What he says though, is he says that the real start of American security apparatus betraying America was the Patriot Act following 9/11. And it's like, my man, there is a proud history in this country of the FBI, the NSA, and the CIA being directly involved in domestic politics.
So I was trying to figure out why they were calling out the Patriot Act. Like at first I was like, he was like leading up to it. I was like, clearly he's going to talk about the Patriot Act. I am sure I could find him writing an essay at some point in time about why the Patriot Act was good.
100%, yeah.
But what they do is there's a picture of, I'm not even sure it's the signing of the Patriot Act, but in the picture is Robert Mueller. And they zoom in and focus on the fact that like Robert Mueller was in the room or involved in the Bush administration when they passed the Patriot Act, even though he was just like, he was the director of the FBI at the time.
Yeah. And
but so the point of it was to make us scared of the Patriot Act by associating it with Robert Mueller, because the target audience of this movie just kind of knows that Robert Mueller is like a guy that does witch hunts.
He's one of the bad guys. Yeah.
Right.
It would have been great to juxtapose that with like the Squad not voting to, renew the Patriot Act and feel like, oh wait, now I've got confusing feelings.
The problem there's many problems with this movie. It starts off with the fact that the person that he goes to, that he spends the majority of the time like as his other filmmaker, is Dan Bongino, who's like he's a right-wing talk show host, and he goes to him as a subject matter expert on governments, police, and it's just it would be the functional equivalent of making a movie. And it's like, I call the foremost expert up, Tucker Carlson, on this subject, and we riffed, and wouldn't you know what the conclusion we came to was. But there's also, like most documentaries, there are a lot of interviews with people that have been personally affected by various things and whatever. And there's one long stretch of the movie where he attempts to tell a sob story about someone who was involved in the January 6th riots. And the only person who would go on camera to talk about how sad this was the person's aunt. And like when that happens, you know that he was turned down by literally every other person in this person's life until he found the crazy aunt on Facebook that, is the one pushing the shitty right-wing memes. And he's like, yeah, she'll have something to say to me on camera about this.
What was sad to me, but that was actually, so for me, that was like the most, well, other than the beginning ruled, but we'll get to that in a second. That was the most like emotionally affecting part of the movie for me. But I just felt really bad because they're describing somebody who clearly had struggles in life that they're just glossing over, and likely struggled with, like a lot of people do, likely struggled with some very severe. I think they even briefly mentioned he had like a drug problem at some point. And what, instead of like doing a dive into this person's kind of, tragic but tragically common circumstances, we just talked to his weird Facebook aunt.
Like, yeah, you can tell that story without the weird relative interview. Was Ashley Babbitt's mother interviewed at all?
No, but they do point to where Ashley Babbitt was shot.
Oh, okay.
He talks to this, you can bleep this if you want, Republican congressperson who takes him on a tour of one of the most, this movie has some of the most unsettling looking people that you've ever seen. Like there's one guy who I can only describe as like the wettest person I've ever seen. Who keeps
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, he just keeps showing up. There's a guy who just like kind of says like he's the guy who like describes like the FBI raiding his house because he had assaulted somebody walking into an abortion clinic. He talks about, I don't know if it was he talks about the FBI coming to his house and going out front and saying like there's 7 babies in there. They never explain why there's 7 babies in this guy's house.
It's a lot of babies.
What does he do? Like, why does he have like I don't what is I think I gathered that he just like has 7 kids of like various ages.
Oh, and he's just calling them all babies.
He's calling them all babies.
I'll accept that. That's fine.
They could be fur babies. He could just have a lot of dogs too.
It's a good point.
There's a scene where somebody it's totally unexplained, where there's like a January 6th coded guy just like in a prison cell, and it's like kind of shows him just like in the cell, and a prison guard comes by and to give him his food, but before he will like give him his food, he shouts, "Mask on." It makes him
has to put his mask on, even though the door of the cell isn't being open. They're just opening the food slot. But just the idea of like, no, they're going to make you wear a mask even in prison.
Yep.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this about the movie: is it a documentary in the sense that it is tracking these changes and it's heading towards a bad thing, or is it trying to paint a hypothetical future and it's like
this movie is unapologetic with the idea that we are currently living in a police state.
There and okay
we're there already, and it makes very liberal use of the definitions of what leads to a police state. There is way too much reference in this movie to the Third Reich and the rise of Hitler, and a lot of parallels to modern society about things that the Germans did in order to keep control of society.
He compares the Reichstag fire to January 6th, but in like a way that like... So the way he describes the Reichstag fire is it was actually caused by communists, but it was used as an excuse for Hitler to like grab all these powers, which I guess makes it a parallel for January 6th in that his people actually did it.
I mean, isn't the better parallel 9/11, because then the Patriot Act is your actual grabbing of power?
But then they also kind of hinted at January 6th being driven by
a federal agent.
Yeah,
I forget
by
what
people.
Epps was his name. Yeah,
what do they call that?
Crisis act.
No, it's not a crisis actor.
False flag.
Well, yeah, but it's like a false flag type thing. I can't think of the term right now, but it's like somebody comes in and they're there basically to rile the crowd up and spur them to violent action to give the police an excuse to crack down on them.
It's a, oh my God, I know exactly what you're trying to say.
Well, anyway.
An instigator.
It's some type of instigator.
It's some sort of like false instigator or something like that, right?
But they don't like really go anywhere with that. And like the people they talk about like really did it. So like, I don't know what point you're trying to make. But
there were a lot of people. If even half of them were faking it, there's still the other half.
So it is like we're in a police state, and the police state is run by fragile college students that want safe spaces and minorities.
Oh,
and actually, there's Yeonmi Park shows up, who's like a pretty well documented liar about. She may be like mentally ill in some way, I don't know, but if she's like making stuff up, but she's a pretty well documented
like Carissa
liar
Thompson
about about like conditions in North Korea. But she makes the point. She says that because of like woke college campuses, we're just like North Korea, except we're actually worse because people can change genders here.
Had she taken the North Korean government up on their offer to go back? I assume there is an offer on the table for her to go back.
But the
perfectly nice gulag with her name on it.
Right.
I thought the movie was going to be better based on the beginning, because the movie starts with this dramatic scene.
With the family having their door kicked in.
There's like the most...
They're all
like,
praying at the kitchen table.
Yeah, the most like white Christian suburban family you've ever seen. they're all just like praying at the kitchen table and talking about how like they're law abiding and all that stuff. And the FBI shows up and just knocks down their door. There's like this like really dramatic raid, and all the FBI agents are people of color.
Oh,
and like they're all doing horrendous things in this guy's house. Like, first off, not only are they people of color, they've got their hats on backwards, as they're going into the house, and like it shows him ransacking the dude's house. It's going through his wife's underwear drawer, and he's holding up like a thong that he found in there. They clearly make a point of showing that they're pulling out this guy's service medals from the military.
Wow.
It was the opening scene of this movie is phenomenal. So that's where this movie is the best. This movie is the best when there are little moments where they're clearly dramatized, and they've got like actors playing people. So they have the actors playing on the FBI raid.
The guy who's the head U.S. Marshal in the show Justified is in this movie.
Wow.
He plays the FBI, the head like FBI guy who identifies and chooses to target Dinesh.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's the same guy, I think, where when they have the scene of Trump being elected president, like he expresses dismay, and as he's acting in this dismayed and shocked fashion that our plan is ruined now that Donald Trump is here as president.
Man, I love that a career FBI agent in Mueller is also, yeah, that's great. I love that.
So my number one takeaway from this movie was that I really, really wish I had the money to make a version of this movie about Soccer United marketing and MLS from the point of view of like a pro-rel truther or like World Soccer Talk, where, you know, it's me making this movie, and it's dramatization about how the pro-rel movement has been crushed in this country, that they're supporting a capitalist regime that's taking soccer away from the people. And you can have interviews. The crazy people on this one can be like, you know, Kartik from World Soccer Talk, Chris Harris from World Soccer Talk, Ted Westervelt from Soccer Reform, Ben Fast.
The dream team.
Rocco Camiso, talking about his lawsuit against U.S. Soccer. The guy who
Silva.
owned the New York... Silva that owned the Cosmos. No, who owned the Cosmos? Was that
that was Rocco.
That was Rocco, and Silva owned the Miami FC.
Still does?
So So you would have all of these characters, you know, some people from the Northern Guard at Detroit City FC. And
Dude,
have an entire film in this exact style. It would be electric.
Even if it wasn't this style, because I'm assuming there's some degree of production value with this film, you could do like a zeitgeist or loose change, like just panning on images with scary voiceover style.
The dramatic scenes have some production value. You know, I got to admit, the interview scenes
terrible
are bafflingly shot.
He's
constantly cutting to himself, making the strangest like faces and body contortions while he's listening to people.
So what was your favorite shot that they used for talking head scenes? Was it the inexplicable on a balcony overlooking a first floor lobby where there wasn't enough room for the camera? So like the camera had to be looking at like Dinesh through a doorway for how they shot this? Or was it the interview with Rand Paul where his staffers had clearly said, you have 15 minutes with the congressman and we're going to have to do it outside on this balcony because he's not going to where you want to shoot this at?
Senator.
Sorry, whatever.
Don't besmirch the great name of Rand Paul.
Yeah, like it was inexplicably shot in terms of where all of these people were interviewed and how they were framed and where the location was. And I can only imagine it's because very few of the people he was interviewing actually wanted.
I liked the scene. I liked the scene in the kitchen talking to the two blonde moms. And it talks about, it talks about them in connection with like the parent teacher conference people that go up and they yell about like students using litter boxes and stuff. But like that's
real, by the way.
And it sure. And so it talks about, but they talk about the like one of them getting arrested, and it's all done in the context of that kind of thing. And they do look like women who would be doing that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong. But I looked her up, and no, she like broke into the local board of elections and tried to help somebody hack the voting machines.
like if these are your heroes and you're worried about living in a police state where, let's say, I don't know, democracy is called into question. I don't know.
They totally let you believe that she had gotten like arrested for talking about gender stuff.
Well, you know, the breaking into the board of elections only gave them the pretense for the real crime they wanted to prosecute her for. Right. Just a mean tweet or two. I will say, this is D'Souza's a funny one for me because, like, in a previous life, I knew D'Souza as a Christian apologetic. That was his whole deal back in the day, was that he was out there arguing the rational case for Christianity and God and all of that. And he was the president of King's College, which is a like Christian liberal arts school in New York. That is, I mean, I'm sure
Pennsylvania, I think, right?
No, it's in New York. It's in like
the Empire State Building or something. Yeah,
Ooh.
It's in Manhattan.
But it was
there's probably more than one King's College, but the one that Kevin's talking about is in Manhattan.
But he had to resign from that one when he was the president because he showed up to these like conferences with this woman that he was introducing as his fiance, and he was like staying with at these conferences, and he was very much married to somebody else at the time. So that was a little awkward for the old D'Souza there. So
hey man, when you're a top dog Christian apologist and running King's College in the greatest city in the world,
they let you do it.
Yeah, they let you do it.
Oh man, yeah, it's just a slow slide from like respectable public intellectual to whatever the hell it was you guys just watched. Man,
I'm gonna go on the limb.
I don't regret watching it.
Nobody should watch it though.
But don't watch it.
Like I have a special kind of brainworm that makes watching movies like this very funny. But like, if you're at all normal, spare yourself.
Yeah. Especially if so much of like the real story is forcing you to go 4 or 5 pages deep on a Google search to find out like, wait, what was this woman actually arrested for? Wait, who is this guy actually? Like, yeah, you don't need that in your life. Well, final thoughts. I don't know if you had to give it a letter grade, if this was presented to you as a senior project of some sorts, I'll let you decide if that's a high school or college project there, Chief. What are we giving it?
We're gonna give it an old D-. Okay. It's factually and grossly incorrect in its characterization of how life works and how history works and what is happening in this country. But there are some really entertaining dramatized scenes, and I give it the D for just being very earnest and committed to its own concept. So yeah,
there it is. Well, Chief gives it the D. Grayson, what would you give this film?
So I think it kind of is owed 2 different grades. I would say as a film, as an objective work of art, it's an F. It's terrible. But if I was grading this as a woke professor who ascribed to postmodernism, I would have to give it an A, because he's manifesting his own truth here. He is certainly expressing himself.
You might get him to rescind the A if you explained it that way. No, Professor, I would like to fail this class. Thank you very much.
No, this is actually true. This actually happened. This is me grabbing the bull by the horns.
Oh, my God. Well, there you go, folks. the punishment is paid. Chief, if memory serves me correctly, you owe one more. Not to bring this up, but I don't know what the additional one should be, though.
Yeah, we'll have to have the listeners decide that one. I don't have any good ideas. Well, I think we had said I have to write an article for the postcincy.com. The ultimate punishment, having to write something.
That's pretty rough. You should have to do just the match recap of the Philadelphia game. That's your punishment. Well, whenever we do decide a punishment, or if you have an idea for one, please send them on in, and we will make sure whoever it is, and particularly Chief, is punished on this podcast. So there you go. Hopefully you've all learned your lesson, and we will not be saying any more swear words on this podcast anymore. Okay, well, I think that'll do it for this episode of the Postcast. We will have a Thursday episode for folks. I don't know why, but keep an eye out for a Thursday episode. I imagine it'll be our least downloaded episode ever. So if like 4 of you out there could just remember to do the old auto download, that'd be great. Make sure we don't dip too low. But otherwise, have a great Thanksgiving week. Good luck to you, Chief, struggling through this week.
And fuck Columbus.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cincy Postcast, which is a production of The Post Cincy. You can check us out at thepostcincy.com for all of our written content, as well as links to our social media. You can follow us on Twitter, and as well, you can join us on our Discord server. You can find links to that server both in this episode description as well as on our website. That is where most of our conversations are going on. We have a lovely community there talking about FC Cincinnati, MLS, anything and everything else and everything in between. We also want to give a huge thanks to Jim Trace and the Makers for providing all of the music you've heard throughout this episode. They're an amazing local Cincinnati band. Again, more information about them is in the description of this episode. And if you enjoyed what you listened to, and you've made it to the end, so I'm going to assume you liked it, or you just can't reach your stop button, please like us, review us, subscribe to us wherever you are getting your podcasts. That is going to be really, really helpful. But more importantly, share this with a friend. A personal recommendation helps spread a podcast so much further. So please share this if you know somebody in your life who's an FC Cincinnati fan, an MLS fan, somebody that you think would enjoy this. Pass it on over. Thank you so much again for listening. It blows me away that people continue to listen to us, and thank you so much again.